boxing, the gift that keeps on giving. We've had a week of press conferences, specifically and explicitly the one that everyone's raving about or talking about or reacting to, which is the Chris Eubank, Conor Benn press conference with the egg slap. I'm assuming you've seen this, Chris. What was your reaction to it all?
It's two lads who know how to promote the sport, don't they? Especially Eubank Jr. has always played that sort of villain role, and he's, he knew what he was. He knows how to promote a fight, and also wind people up, which you can see he's obviously got a reaction, very good reaction, which you'll be happy with, I'm sure.
What did you think, Spence? I mean, a lot's been made of observations that people have made. I wasn't particularly offended by it. I thought it was funny. And quite frankly, if the allegation had been made about Chris Eubank that he was subject to some egg controversy and Conor Benn had done the same thing to him, I would think it's funny. I don't think it's great athletes laying hands on one another. But did you think a line was crossed, or did you just think it was a bit of marketing brouhaha?
It was a bit of marketing, and I think that, if you wasn't interested in the fight before, you're definitely interested in it now. And let's break this down, guys. Like, he was as Chris said there, Chris Eubank Jr. has always been the villain, turned victim because of what happened in that last fight, what he put his body through, what he had to go through. So in return, Conor Benn. Conor Benn.
You clapped that one up.
Absolutely. Sorry, Eddie Hearn. I mean, Eddie Hearn's going to kill me on that one.
Excellent.
Conor Benn's got an egg in the side of the head. Like, in comparison, you just look at it and you go, look, I think it's marketing genius. I think that, the longevity from that will be that they will get more pay-per-view sales, they will get more, more exposure. I don't think... Look, it's not a right thing to do, but you can understand it because it's not just happened out of nothing. There's a history behind that.
But it's an irony, though, isn't there, don't you think? Because the irony of it is that Conor Benn has never accepted the egg defence. It was never something that he put forward. It was never something that he verbalised. It was never something he agreed with. It was something that was given to him by the WBC.
Yeah.
So he's actually not guilty of the very things that Chris Eubank is alleging that he used eggs as defence. There's a slight irony to it, but we'll get into that a little bit more. But I wanted to ask you, Chris, I've got views of Chris Eubank Jr. as a boxer. I think he's a great showman. I think when he gets into press conferences, he creates a narrative all about himself and he plays a certain role and it gets everybody engaged. But there's the Chris Eubank Jr., the boxer, who every time I think steps up to world-class level loses. But do you have a view of him as a boxer? What do you think of him? Yeah,
I mean, I have a view of both him and Conor. I have a similar view in terms of they've been given a platform because of their surnames, because of their dads. And I respect them both because it'd be very hard to push yourself as much as they both have during their careers, with all the criticism that comes with being, your father's son when you've had dads that they've got.
Yeah.
And they've pushed themselves and put in the work ethic that you'd expect from that I've put in, for example, someone who hasn't had an upbringing like theirs, and in terms of the opportunities, it'd be very easy for them, is what I'm saying, to just take a few fights, earn a bit of cash just because their name, stuff like that. So from that point of view, their work ethic, I really admire it. I do think Chris, you'd like. I believe he's good enough to win a world title. I believe he had the ability in the past. He's had a long time out. He hasn't lit the world up in his last performance, but he's got the job done. Against George Groves, he fell short. Is
there any part of you that looks at it and goes, "Well, I was a bona fide, legitimate world title holder. I won my belts. I don't get the recognition and the finances that these two guys that are fighting in a domestic fight, one going up 2 weight classes, one coming down a weight class with no world title, no straps on the belt." Does any of that rankle with you and think, well, hang on a second?
It's a business, isn't it, at the end of the day? And I understand the business, and I understand that if I, cracked an egg across someone's face in that scenario, threw some tables at press conferences, did something like that, then I probably would be paid more than I am, because it causes hype, it causes more attention and builds your name. You're in the limelight more. I've never been that. I've been very sort of authentic throughout my career, and that's not me. So I've just stuck to that, sort of stay true to myself, but probably at the detriment of my purses, which is but that's my own doing.
That's your personality. You're being true to yourself. You're being authentic. Yeah.
Exactly. And I could not be myself and probably earn more money, but that's just not me. So I understand it from a business point of view that these people, they draw in money. I can't draw in the money they're drawing in, the viewers they're drawing in. And that is the way the professional boxing is. It's a business first, it's a sport second.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, Spence, what you thought of the reactions and actions of the two promoters. A lot was made by Chris Eubank Jr. about Eddie Hearn opening his mouth. And I have to say, I think the first question shouldn't necessarily be to Eddie Hearn, which maybe lit up Chris Eubank for saying, I'm not going to listen to him, because he's already had his swipe at all the promoters previously, which he's had to row back from with Frank Warren, isn't he, a little bit. But the conduct of both promoters, getting involved in the scenes, having strong opinions about them afterwards, what do you make of what Ben and Eddie have had to say? Ben's sort of gone down the line of as a bit of a laugh. Eddie's been all offended whilst representing fighters like Derek Chisora that have thrown tables up, whilst himself trying to get a fight on 2 years ago when one of the fighters had failed drugs tests. So he's all offended about certain things.
Listen, I think that, look, we attended the second press conference and we must remember this is about Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr, the family feud, the fathers, the sons, and all that sort of stuff. Eddie Hearn had a lot to say at that press conference, and I think Chris Eubank Jr had done the right thing by shooting him down, saying, listen, mate, it's not about you, it's about us. Leave that, let Conor speak if he wants to speak, but he was being Conor's voice box, if you like, a lot of the time. And Chris Eubank Jr, I think he owned it, if I'm totally honest. I think he went out there, he done what he should have done. It was all premeditated, but he's a very smart kid. He knows how to sell a fight, and he didn't want to hear from Eddie. So it is what it is. I think that it was always going to be like that. And I think he got under Eddie's skin, and you've got to say that Chris Eubank Jr owned that one.
What did you, I mean, you went to the second press conference, right?
Yeah.
What did you make of it? I mean, obviously, the build-up of the first one was all that it was. And we saw the altercations, we saw people getting in one another's faces, we saw the egg, we saw Nigel Benn grabbing hold of him, we'll talk about that in a second. We saw Eddie Hearn pushing Ben Shalom, we saw the melee, right, and all that. And it's, to me, it's handbags. And I know that you can make a noise out of the fact that it shouldn't be done. But at the second press conference, you saw a slightly different dynamic, you saw a slightly different approach. What did you take away from that second press conference?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I saw there. Literally what I was explaining there with Eddie Hearn trying to be the voice box really for Team Ben.
But from the two fighters?
From the two fighters, I think it was Chris Eubank Jr all the way. I thought he dealt with it brilliantly. I think the way that he conducted himself, the way that he was speaking, he's a genius, not just at marketing, but he's a genius at getting inside the heads. Conor Benn, we know, is an emotional kid. Yeah. Chris Eubank Jr presses the buttons. He's saying the right things, and I think that's what he did. That's what I took from it.
Which is what he did when he made the point to Nigel Benn, which was, I'll give you a pass. You put your hands on me, I'll give you a pass. Everyone thinks this is all going to be nice, and Nigel says, I'm sorry about that. And he says, but if you do it again, you won't get your hand back. So he knows that's going to light Conor up. What do you make of Chris's stance about going after him as a drugs cheat and going after the rehydration clause? If you don't want to fight what you consider to be a drugs cheat, then don't fight him. So don't you think there's a bit of hypocrisy about this?
Listen, it's all part of the marketing. Again, Chris knows exactly what he's doing because, of the history of these two, going back 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when this fight first fell through, he's always going to reignite that because he knows that's going to get in Conor's head, whether he's been cleared or not cleared. That's always going to stick. And I think that Eubank is going to use that right up to the build-up.
But it is hypocrisy, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Because the easy response to that is if you don't want to fight, if you think I'm a drug student, don't fight me.
Yeah, of course it is. But that is the selling point. That's what he's going to do.
Because it's all about money, isn't it? Because Chris is now saying in the rehydration clause, I'm offended with the fact that you've only limited me to £10 when actually the IBF limit is 12. Yeah. And you've already limited me beneath that. I should be able to go up to what level I want. And then he says in the next breath, but you're paying me for that privilege. I'll get on with it. That's
what I'm saying. He's using it. Look, Chris vouched for me here as a fighter. He's using that. This is where the mental battles are won and lost in the build-up. This is going to be a long month for these two, going through these press conferences and whatnot. And Chris Eubank Jr is trying to get into his head to go, he knows he's an emotional kid, and if you don't stick to the game plan, you go out there, you make a fundamental mistake, and boom, you pay the price for it. Chris Eubank Jr, correct me if I'm wrong, is getting Conor into this emotional state, so Conor comes straight out the blocks, tries to knock him out, and makes a mistake and pays for it. I think that's what Chris is doing. He's got a game plan, and he's sticking to it. He's trying to get into Conor's head, and that's where fights are won and lost.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what Chris does well anyway. He just tries to get under people's skin, whether it's Conor, whether it's somebody else. obviously I was in camp with George Groves in that fight, and they were really trying to get under George's skin, and George was too long in the tooth for it. But Conor's young in terms of his boxing career, the level, the sort of needle fights he's had. He hasn't had many of them, so Chris has been there and done it, you know, and he's very experienced in these sort of...
But this is it for Chris, though, isn't it? I mean, Conor Benn can lose this fight and still go on because he's got the ready-made built-in insulation that he's gone up 2 weight classes at a stage. If Chris comes down to 160 and fights a welterweight at 140, OK, he's walking around as a light heavyweight. And his dad says, you know, he's walking around as a light heavyweight at 170, 175.
Whatever he campaigns
but if Chris loses, if Chris loses this, then there is no more, is there? This is it.
End of the road.
Besides the rematch.
That's the gamble that Chris Eubank Jr is taking right now. If he loses this and he loses to a welterweight, he's got big problems. If Conor loses, he's got that, they're going, I'm dropping down in weight. It was too much of a task, too much of a, you know, but I mean, look, we're all talking about Chris Eubank Jr. We're not really talking about Conor Henn. So, look, he's doing his job. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
he's
because we're at press
job.
conference stage, because ultimately we're at the spectacle of the press conferences. When you look at the fight, Chris, who do you think is going to win this fight?
I mean, excuse me, if you look through history, you have to favour the bigger man. Like, it's very... There's obviously been occasions where the smaller man won. I mean, I was at Mayweather-Canelo, where, you know, Mayweather was by far the smaller man. Obviously, it was at 152, not 154, which Canelo was at the time. And it was a boxing lesson, but a very, very young Canelo and a very, you know, we're talking about Floyd Mayweather, one of the, you know, the best.
You're going right to the top of the tree then, though, aren't you?
Yeah, and no disrespect to Conor, you know, he's no Floyd Mayweather, and I don't think he'll mind me saying that. So you have to favour Chris, although he hasn't, like I said, he didn't light up the world in his last performance. Neither has Conor in his last couple. So based on that, you have to favour.
Is that what you're going to do? You're going to favour Chris?
Yeah, I think I edge towards Chris, but Conor's style's a good style. If he can stay. Sometimes putting on the weight can be a good thing. It can give you more energy and, you know, make you the power, you know, increase your power, etc. But sometimes it can tire you out later on in a fight, being a little bit not used to carrying that extra weight. And Conor's style is very aggressive. He could overwhelm Chris early and, you know, and catch him and buzz him. But
which we saw Liam Smith do.
Exactly. But I just think Chris is probably learned from the Billam-Smith fight. Will be, you know, very, very motivated, as they both will. But I do think it'll be an exciting fight. But yeah, I'd probably edge just towards Chris.
We'll look forward to it,
on the weight.
And we'll get to hear a lot about it between now and then, I'm sure. Anyway, let's move on.